I'm Dr. Allan Perel, and this is Conversations in Medicine. I'm Dr. Allan Perel, and this is Conversations in Medicine, a program dedicated to bringing cutting-edge medical topics to the Staten Island and tri-state community. Today's topic, we're going to talk about Parkinson's disease and the American Parkinson's Disease Association. My two wonderful guests that I have here is Sally Ann Esposito Brown, on the Executive Board Member for the American Parkinson's Disease Association, and Dr. Lisa Esposito, also on the Executive Board of the American Parkinson's Disease Association.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all your work. And I almost feel like a guest myself. I'll give my name, Allan Perel, and I'm the Medical Director of the American Parkinson's Disease Information and Referral Center of Brooklyn and Staten Island. So it's a long title. And sometimes on this show, we talk about a lot of different topics. Today we're going to talk about Parkinson's disease, which is near and dear to a neurologist, and you guys do so much wonderful work. As you know, and just to tell the audience, people are afraid of the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. It is a degenerative disease of the brain. It affects well over 1 million people in the United States. The average age of onset is about 60. Sometimes we think about this as a very old person's disease, but with some famous people like Michael J. Fox, Muhammad Ali, we see that it really isn't at that point. A lot of different signs of it. Everybody talks about Parkinson's disease being something with regard to tremors, with regard to stiffness, but there are a lot of non-motor symptoms also. People have problems with their bowels, sense of smell, a lot of different things that occur with people with Parkinson's disease. So we're going to jump right in. So tell us, the American Parkinson's Disease Association is headquartered on Staten Island. It's the only national organization. So tell us, as executive board members, tell us about the APDA.
The APDA, the American Parkinson's Disease Association, essentially was founded out of the love of my grandmother, Eleanor Esposito. Upon her passing, my grandfather wanted to do a foundation in her memory, and he was approached by, was that his accountant? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to embellish that a bit?
The accountant knew somebody who had Parkinson's disease, and this was in the late 50s, and needed help, and there wasn't too much that was known about it. So even though they did a lot of research into other organizations and schools even, they chose this one because somebody they knew needed help at this point.
Do you think it was almost like an orphan disease in the late 50s? Nobody really did.
It's interesting. Parkinson's disease was described by a guy named James Parkinson in England in the 1800s, early 1800s. Mm-hmm. And he talked about people with stiffness and cognitive problems, and they used the word shaking palsy because of the shaking and the tremor that they had. So for a number of years, we didn't have any treatments for it. And neurology as a whole, and with regard to neurodegenerative diseases and Parkinson's disease specifically, there's a ton of treatments available, and we're going to talk about them. There are medicines, there are surgical procedures. And as a neurologist on Staten Island, we have so many patients. Every neurologist has a lot of patients with Parkinson's disease. And the idea of when someone comes into my office, we try to counsel them, we talk about different things. I have a social worker who works with us, my wife, and we try to figure out what we could do to help someone with this diagnosis. And one of the few things that we can do, which really has made a big difference, other than medicines and treatments and therapies, is really refer people to the American Parkinson's Disease Association. There are a tremendous number of things, and interestingly enough, it's on Parkinson's Avenue.
Yes.
And the Parkinson's Avenue actually was there before they were.
Serendipitously ended up on Parkinson's Avenue, which...
It actually started in our aunt's house.
Yeah.
My cousins are very instrumental in keeping this going forward as well.
So let's talk, when I give them a referral to the American Parkinson's Association. We'll call it APDA for make it easy. What kind of things, what kind of support do they get? And as board members, what kind of things do you help support? We know about research. We could talk about that a little bit. But to the individual person from Staten Island, there are centers in Brooklyn, as I said, all over the tri-state area, all over the nation. If someone calls up the APDA or goes on its website, what kind of things do they get? Books, literature? So tell us a little bit about it, Lisa.
So since the inception, they've raised over $185 million, and a lot of that goes to research, but also part of the mission is the information and referral centers, and the support for the caregivers, and then of course for the Parkinsonians. So it's actually somewhere for the Parkinsonians to interact with one another. They have, like just in, like was NYU alone, I'm sorry, Presbyterian, they've had 5 support groups, over 1,000 people in attendance. They have the dance therapy, which is really important, the Tai Chi.
There's actually a fairly new program. It started around 2017. It's called PRESS. This is something I like. It stands for, I don't want to get anything wrong today, Parkinson's Roadmap for Education, Support, and Service for people who are diagnosed in less than 5 years. And it's a map to tell them what they have to do next. It's about an 8-week program, and each week they cover a new topic to help someone. I mean, what would you do if you were diagnosed with something you don't know what to do? What's your next step? And our organization has tried to give people the steps as to what they do. As far as my sister mentioned, the support groups, and our organization has been the leading organization to not just do some research, because we spoke, Michael J. Fox is a big leader with research, but our organization helps the people and their families, their caregivers who have the disease right now at this moment in time, with all the chapters and support groups.
And I remember years ago, Mrs. Ali came to Staten Island. I think you
was
were
with her,
the
yes.
MC, and she spoke to us about her experiences as a caregiver and APDA, how it helps, and you know, it's a very important part of the whole family structure and how, you know, people deal with Parkinson. And also, I particularly really like the blogs on the APDA website. I think they give a lot of information. Some of it is scientific, some of it is nutritional. You know, there's one on menopause, the drugs, employment in Parkinson's disease, the cognitive decline concerns. There's information on music therapy, art therapy, and other novel complementary therapies. So there's a lot of blog information, and one could even submit a question of something that's affecting their life, and they could,
And that's
they could have a blog
so wonderful.
on it. Yeah.
So when my patients, family members, patients call the APDA, they always get this literature. They get a lot of books, a lot of things that they could read, so that's so important. And it's a very unusual neurological disorder in that someone comes to my office, I don't need to get a CAT scan, an MRI, all kinds of other tests, and we don't have that many biomarkers in order to make the diagnosis. And someone is somewhat shocked that after 20, 30 minutes, I say, I think you have Parkinson's disease. And they look at me and say, how do you know that? And the symptoms are, of course, the tremor, that's that pill rolling type tremor. It's a different kind of tremor than if you're anxious. It's kind of, we call it a high amplitude, low frequency tremor, where it goes like pill rolling. Stiffness, problems walking. And that's why when you mention Tai Chi, that's so important for people. Because balance therapy. There's been numerous studies with yoga and Tai Chi helping people prevent falls. And just the idea of all the medicines that are out there. There are so many new treatments that are out there that weren't there before. And most patients with Parkinson's disease are actually treated in the community. They're treated here. And people, think about the difficulty, NYU, Columbia, and I trained at Columbia. It's tough to go from Staten Island to Columbia. They might have certain things that we aren't available right now, such as some type of surgical procedures. And we do send people, and I send people over there for those kind of opinions. But the idea that they could be treated close by, and both with the medical aspects from someone like myself, and the idea the APDA can treat them, can help them. recognize what's going on, get all the balance therapies, get the yoga, get the Tai Chi, really does dramatically affect their lives. You mentioned it, I think, Sally Ann, or you, Lisa, that about the families. So tell us about how you support the caregivers.
We have it's a lot of information, dissemination of information and exchange of information, having more of an empathetic exchange of what their experiences are. And they can get factual information from the website and call the national headquarters and speak to the coordinator for the caregivers.
You mentioned you direct them to APDA, where people they could get books, they could get tons of information, they could go right on the website, and all of the information that could get sent to them is free. On top of the fact, it also comes in other languages. And the more knowledge someone has, the benefit. So right there, as far as family members, caregivers, whoever's next to the person taking care of them, we say when this person gets Parkinson's, everybody next to them has Parkinson's. And it is not a disease that discriminates, it goes to everybody. And the classes, for instance, that are at the national organization on Highland Boulevard, the person who helps the support, the caregiver is also welcome to go and attend those classes. And there's just countless amounts of information that are available to them. There are websites that cover a gamut of Parkinson's disease. We have webinars as well. Over 59,000 views have been had on our websites already.
So if someone has Parkinson's disease and is watching us, a wonderful audience that we have, do you recommend that everyone with Parkinson's disease contact the American Parkinson's Disease
Absolutely.
Association? The answer is yes.
Yeah, I strongly recommend it.
Do you need a doctor's referral to call them?
No.
No. And if you have a family member or even a question about Parkinson's disease, they'll funnel it out. I get questions all the time. So we try to answer the questions in a way that makes it understandable. Because sometimes in this world, when you're told that you have this type of process, it's hard to accept, and it's also hard to understand all the nuances of it in the doctor's office. So many things happen afterwards. Yeah. And when you go to the doctor or your healthcare professional, and they go over things like this, there's always that disbelief. Is it really there? Is it not really there? Could they be making a mistake about it? Sometimes seeing the literature, seeing what you guys have, seeing what's on the website, really helps people feel more comfortable or confident that the diagnosis has been correct. And that makes a very big difference. So let's go on a little bit more about the APDA. And actually, I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you that I'll never forget the night that I was made medical director. It was in your father's house. Your mom was there. And your father sat me down. I was in practice for about 5 years. It was about 20 years ago. And said to me, put his arm around me and said, do you like Parkinson's disease? Or do you like treating it? I said, yes, of course. I was trained in the city. I'm very much. He says, we're looking for someone out here to take over the referral center in Staten Island and Brooklyn. And I'd like you to do it. And I just got started. I just got married. I had my kids. And I think maybe I hesitated for a moment. And he said, there's no choice. You're gonna, and that was your dad always. And I'm going to let you talk about your dad a little bit. Because every year we do a lecture at the American Parkinson's Association in his memory, the Sal Esposito Memorial Lecture, where I talk about new cutting edge type of things in Parkinson's disease. So let me tell you about your dad and maybe talk about your uncle and everybody who's been so intimately involved in this over the years, because so many of the Staten Islanders who are out here know your family and know what you guys, how involved you have been. And I'll even start saying one thing quickly. The American Parkinson's Association is a non-for-profit. This is a group where all the money goes back into the communities. So that's something that I want to say openly. But please tell us about your dad, your mom, your uncle, and some of the stories, because I think everybody might know them who are listening to us here today.
So, as I had mentioned, my grandfather started in honor of my grandmother, Allan Esposito, and my dad and his siblings, they were very passionate about keeping, they started the Salvatore and Elena Esposito chapter, and my father and his siblings were very passionate about promoting the mission and, making it a very successful foundation. And it obviously has, thank God, has grown, nationally and some international. But on a personal note, I remember when I was a young girl, probably 5 or 6 years old, and I remember my mother and my aunt wrapping these tremendous number of gifts that were in my Aunt Sophie's house, and they were getting ready for one of the big fundraisers. And as an adult, having some experience doing fundraisers, looking back to what they accomplished, it was tremendous. They started with some events on Tavern on the Green in Staten Island, and then eventually they had these tremendous events at the Waldorf Astoria in Manhattan. Beautiful fashion show. They were filled the whole entire ballroom, and they had these magnificent gifts, which I mean, I would love to go to one of these events now. The weekend at Gurney's, all kinds of china, but thinking back about how they accomplished all that, and they put their heart and souls and a lot of their own finances into it, and it just grew and grew, and you know the need for it is tremendous. I forget what's the current statistics on how many people have Parkinson's
About
disease.
1.5 million people in the United States.
It's a tremendous number, and there's like they're diagnosed like every 10 minutes or something. So, you know, my father, Salvatore, he was the national president, my Uncle Mario, and my Aunt Sophie was like the catalyst for so many of these events and lent to its success. My cousins are on the board, and everybody's very dedicated. My son has also done some fundraising, so it's going down to another generation, which I'm very happy about.
And how about you, Sally? And I know you and Vincent, your son, and your family also so much about. Tell us a little bit.
They don't have a choice, actually. They'll be rolling into our positions at some point. But, you know, you mentioned, you know, we had the first chapter. Someone else had started it, Ada Hirsch, in the Rockaways, and she had Parkinson's pretty badly. And she just couldn't, because of her disease, she couldn't get the ball rolling. And that's how the family was very instrumental with that part of it as well, to keep the ball rolling, to have the monies raised. And I remember from the point where I was little to where we are now, the medications that have been created by all these scientists, the research, the money, really, we see the money, where it goes, and that's part of our job. It's not getting squandered, not this much. And these monies, besides are being used for all the patients, they go to the research, the scientists. I was recently at the scientific, it was a 2-day event for our scientists, of which they go over a big number of possible research that wants to be done by certain newcomers, and it's scrutinized big time, and then they pick what may be a good possibility for the future. And in the meantime, these research, you know, the research that has been done has created medicines like levodopa and carbidopa, and also even the deep brain stimulation operation. This is all new in essence. Not that it's new in the 2000s, but it's been created since '61 from when we started to this point. It was non-existent prior to that. So this is where the money's going. It's really getting utilized properly.
That's
really
wonderful to hear. So let's talk about Parkinson's disease a little bit, and treatments, and from a doctor's point of view. So Parkinson's disease, as we were talking about, is a neurodegenerative disease. It affects the nerve cells that produce something called dopamine, just what you said. And it's an eminently treatable process. We give medicines called L-Dopa, which get broken down into dopamine, so it replaces what's missing in the brain. What the research through the APDA and other groups have come up with is why does it happen? And they found this unusual chemical. It's sort of toxic to the brain, called alpha-synuclein. It's this bubblegum-like material that clogs up a certain part of the brain. And what it does is it breaks down these cells that make dopamine. And what we do is try to give that back. So now when you talk about research with it, what do I see? I see new medications, and there are a lot of new medicines to try to keep this dopamine around. We're looking for more treatments, and some of the treatments that patients come in and talk to me about, they're actually looking for a vaccine. So if we can get rid of that alpha-synuclein, that bad, big word, big Scrabble word, if we can get rid of that, possibly we could slow down the progression of the process. And we want to diagnose people early. The most important thing is to treat people and diagnose people early, because even if you're diagnosed early, a lot of those cells are gone already. So we really want to try to do that, and we're looking for something that helps protect the brain. So those are the way we look at this is really symptomatic treatment, trying to get back the dopamine, trying to preserve the brain. And if that doesn't work, we use, as you said, Sally Ann, something called deep brain stimulation. We put a little electrode in the brain to stimulate a part of the brain that makes you move better. Because Parkinson's disease gives you that slow movement. If we're older patients, what happens is, if you think about someone who's very old, they walk a little bit Parkinsonian. You have short steps, you don't use your arms as much, your turning radius is more difficult, you're shaky. And that's what happens to a large extent earlier on in Parkinson's disease. So we're really very much on the forefront of treatment, maybe on the forefront, hopefully, of a cure. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and every time I try to get too enthusiastic, we get frightened away and say maybe not. But the vaccines and some of the treatments really have such a dramatic effect on our patients. So tell us, I think you mentioned there was a family member or someone recently who was diagnosed with Parkinson's?
I mean, prior to recently, nobody in our family had Parkinson's disease. My Uncle George did have Lou Gehrig's disease, so it was good we had neurologists that we knew and loved. My Aunt Camilla was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So she's my godmother, and we all love her very much. She's got the best personality, I guess she would have been the class clown when she was younger. But, it's very sad. And so from our perspective, we're in the fundraising side and supporting the organization, but from your side, and when we experience it, it actually makes me cry when I see people come in with Parkinson's disease and they actually say thank you, and it's a really powerful experience. And to know that we have we can reach out to you and other people regarding my aunt, it's very important. I mean, it's just immensely important. So
And it's just so important to know that there are treatments. People come in and they say, what's going to be my future? And the answer is, right now we treat people. We don't have cures for a lot of diseases, whether it's high blood pressure, strokes, diabetes. We have treatments, and that's what we try to do with Parkinson's disease. Treat people to see if they do well. So I'm going to throw you a curve. You didn't know I was going to ask you this question. Dr. Esposito is a very prominent veterinarian on Staten Island.
Prominent.
Is there any equivalent of Parkinson's disease in animals?
No, I had a feeling you might ask me that, and I thought about it, and as far as I know, no, but maybe it doesn't get recognized. I think there's like somewhat of an MS type syndrome, not exactly the same in German Shepherds, like a degenerative myelopathy.
That's a spinal cord problem.
Yeah, so not necessarily.
Because in higher primates it does.
Yeah.
I mean, that's some of the models that we use for Parkinson's disease for all the research that we do.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you a story. There was something called MTPT, and it was an interesting thing that happened in the 1980s. And they thought there was a cure for Parkinson's disease. And what happened was, there was somebody in San Francisco who was using a synthetic narcotic. And there was a whole neurologist, guy out there in practice, who basically came out and said, I'm seeing a lot of young people with Parkinson's disease. And it turned out the synthetic narcotic was toxic to the brain. So for 20 years, we've been looking for what's in the environment that looks like MPTP. As I said, those are just initials for this large chemical. Never found it. And looking to see, was it in something that we ate, something that was in the environment that was the cause of it? Because we know that Parkinson's disease occurs more in people exposed to pesticides. And we're talking about more farmland pesticides rather than spraying your plants out here in an urban area. But pesticide exposure can be affected with it. And the whole idea of Parkinson's disease, we talked about that chemical alpha-synuclein, it moves in a very strange way, as now we're learning with other degenerative diseases. It goes from cell to cell. So it doesn't come all at once. It sort of spreads from itself because it's this toxic material. and we're trying very hard to try to get rid of that. Some new medicines that are out there, we talked about L-DOPA. There's different ways of using L-DOPA and longer acting ways. So if you're on L-DOPA and you're just not doing that well on it, there are other things we could do. There's something called a dopamine agonist, which are medicines that stimulate the brain. There are certain things that help prevent the breakdown of L-DOPA. They're called MAO-B inhibitors and COMT inhibitors. But again, all these are different medicines that your neurologist, a Parkinson's disease specialist, movement disorder specialist are all very familiar with. And when the therapies just don't work, and then we really have to go further. What's interesting about the therapies is sometimes they make people twitchy. Parkinson's disease, as you know, it's a disorder that makes you slower. And people see someone like Michael J. Fox being very twitchy. You say, well, how could that be Parkinson's disease? It's really an effect of the medication because we're living by the medicines. So we're giving so much of this medicine in order for someone to be able to move around that sometimes people twitch a little bit. So we're coming to the end of our half hour. And what I'd love you guys to do is talk on two things. First of all, if you have Parkinson's disease, and I'd like you to look right into our wonderful audience, to call up the APDA, what they should think about. And the second thing is, if someone wants to volunteer, is this an organization that's looking for volunteers, looking for people to help out? And maybe just talk to this population, to this audience out here, because everybody out here knows somebody with Parkinson's disease. You might not know it. You see someone in the park who's walking very slowly. Their arms aren't moving. They're shaking. So many people have Parkinson's disease. And you sort of look at them in a little bit of a different way now that we maybe described it a little bit more with treatment and what happens. So maybe, Lisa, if you could just talk to our audience for a moment and tell them a little bit about if you want to volunteer.
If you know somebody who has Parkinson's disease or a family member has been diagnosed, I strongly recommend that you contact the American Parkinson's Disease Association, or at least start going on their website, and that way you could help navigate and get information. And this information is curated too, right? So please. Yeah, definitely contact us and volunteer. There's a big walk in the spring that would be very, very an amazing experience. And they certainly could use volunteers organizing it. And I don't know if you want to add anything.
You could have fundraisers, and you could connect with the office, and they'll give you the step-by-step of what you have to do in order to fulfill whatever your goal is with your fundraiser. And April's Parkinson Awareness Month, Lisa mentioned the walk. It's called the Unity Walk up in Central Park every year. It's absolutely incredible. It's all the
Very
Parkinson
touching.
organizations come together. And to see people, there are people that come from all over to the country to this event just to support.
So we all want to get to the day where Parkinson's disease, we don't talk about it
Right,
anymore, where we're
exactly.
able to treat it, cure it. I want to thank you and really thank your family for everything that you've done for the American Parkinson's Association, one of these great national organization treasures on Staten Island. And anyone who has Parkinson's disease, please seek treatment, get information from the APDA. It's really very crucial, especially being treated early in order to try to get the best outcome.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having us. We
Thank you for
appreciate it.
coming.
Thank you.